Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unbreakable. This week, we are super excited to announce a special guest who is here to talk about trans issues. With that, hi, Owen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. So good to be here.
On Pride Month, yay!
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Owen, what makes you so passionate about trans issues?
Well, for starters, I am trans myself, and I feel that there's still so much progress to be made for trans issues in general and trans rights. Pretty much everywhere in the world, there's still problems with housing, employment, healthcare, etc., and just general acceptance towards trans people. So
Yeah,
I feel like we have a lot to improve on that front.
definitely. And can you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Like, how old are you? And
I am 20 years old. I am a college student, and my favorite color is blue.
Okay, I think that's good. Because I know that you, from talking to you before this podcast, that you're very intelligent for your age, and I just wanted people to know that you're a young adult who's been dealing with these issues and that you are passionate about it. So, anyways, so for the next question. What are questions you asked yourself while you were questioning if you're transgender, and do you ever still question it?
I think, well, first of all, I haven't actually said this. I consider myself a transgender man, which means I was assigned female at birth, but I identify as male. And early on, when I was figuring all that out, I asked myself a lot of questions. I wanted to figure out what I wanted, if I wanted to transition, and if that meant a new name or presentation or hormonal transition, etc. I thought about if I would have rather been born male, or if I could instantly press a button that would change my gender, would I? And I mean, even then, all those questions are really tough to answer, and they can take time to really feel certain on.
How long did it take you?
I think actually first started wondering about it when I was about 12, and I didn't know for certain. I didn't have full confidence in my identity and wanting to transition until I was 15.
Wow, okay.
And nowadays, though, I do not really, I'm pretty certain on it. I don't even question it, to be honest.
Good for you.
So, can you tell us about your transition so far? Has it been difficult?
Well, I started basically just socially. I told my friends about it, and I asked them to use a new name for me and new pronouns. And I kind of just experimented with certain labels and stuff and what I wanted to be referred to as. That's kind of how it started. And then when after I came out to my parents, I was more open to experimenting with clothing and clothing.
What types of clothing? What types of clothing are you talking about?
Well, no, I did dress more masculine for starters. I also cut my hair. I also was binding my chest. That made me feel better. And, basically all of that in some way was just I guess validating, even though they were very small things. I've basically been presenting as male for a long time now. I didn't actually start medically transitioning until very recently, but I spent a lot of time just kind of just waiting for the chance to start testosterone because I could not do that when I was younger. But I did have it figured out eventually and for a bit, and I was just making do, I suppose, with what I could do.
And that's probably pretty common?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. And do you feel supported, or do you wish you had more support?
For the most part, I do feel supported. I think the vast majority of people in my life right now are very supportive. Including including like all of my friends. They don't even. It's not even a big deal or anything like that to them.
That's wonderful.
I think right now my biggest issue with support or lack thereof is actually with my dad, who is still. I mean, he loves me. He's just going through a very, very long process of denial and not understanding. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's got to be really hard.
Gotta be hard.
with that being considered, though, I do think my situation is better than most. I really just hope that other trans people can have the support I've had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because some even get kicked out of their homes and their families, right? Yeah.
Right.
That's really sad.
It really is.
How do you describe someone and explain that they're in the process of changing genders without it being offensive? Because I always say the wrong thing.
I usually do too.
Yep.
Well, that process is called transitioning, or their transition. It's kind of important to understand, though, that doesn't have like a strict definition, because every trans person sees it differently and wants different things, and it's not like a cut and dry process.
Okay.
It's also worth noting that if, for example, if you're going to refer to someone in the past from before their transition, if it's not necessary to reference the fact that they're trans, then you don't have to. You should just use their current pronouns and name, etc. And
that makes sense.
Don't even really make it a big deal.
Right.
Right. Okay. If you are, then you would say
you would probably say before their transition, and
Okay.
you would still use their current name and pronouns.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So this is kind of a heated topic, and I'm sorry to throw it at you, but I know there's a lot of controversy. But what do you think about the term gender dysphoria?
Oh, okay. So I think it's more as a term that exists. I think it's more good than bad, and I think it does accurately describe what many trans people can experience and how that experience is unique from, for example, body image issues or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It also is good. It's good that it exists as a medical definition for the purposes of like healthcare and health insurance. I think the bad comes in like some people use it to stigmatize trans people, to say that they're mentally ill, even though the two.
Is that where that comes from?
For the most part, because gender dysphoria is technically a mental illness, but that doesn't equate to like being trans is something that needs to be fixed, because you treat dysphoria by like gender affirmative care, like transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
And your being trans is just a part of who you are. It's not a problem in and of itself. And one last thing, our current understanding of gender dysphoria is a bit limited and dated. It doesn't really accurately encompass like everybody's experience, especially like non-binary individuals, etc. So it's good to just let people describe for themselves what that means to them.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
I was just wondering, what are some misconceptions that you would like to dispel?
There are several.
Go for it. This is, we want to hear these.
I think the big ones are, first of all, many of the stereotypes about trans people being like predatory, or they just want to go to the other gender's bathrooms, stuff like that, or they're dangerous. That's not true.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not true. Another one is that all transition is the same, or is like a one-time procedure. It's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And probably my biggest pet peeve, this might just be me, but my biggest pet peeve is when people argue against transitioning by saying that it's ineffective or that it leads to more issues. And this is kind of based on like a misinterpretation of certain studies that say that on average trans people do have more psychological issues. But that's not because they transitioned, though.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
It's got a lot more to do with the fact that like society doesn't accept them, and transitioning can be hard, etc. It's not because of their transitioning.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to someone questioning their own gender identity, especially coming from the age that you started and being so young?
I think the most important thing is like with everything that you want to figure out when you're younger about yourself, it's a part of, self-discovery, self-exploration. So you got to be patient to yourself, you got to be kind to yourself. You got to ask yourself those tough questions and try to be truthful, but don't stress if you don't have the answers yet. You can read about other people's experiences if that's something that helps you. And yeah, just be good. Just be nice to yourself while figuring that out. It can be hard, but you will eventually figure it out and know what you want. And when you do, though, I would also suggest unfortunately, to be mindful. If you're still dependent on your parents, for example, and you know they won't be supportive, you might have to wait until you're an adult. But if you're instead able to experiment and you have that safety net, then by all means, go for it. just for the sake of experimenting.
Advice.
That's really good advice.
Very good advice. So it was awesome to have Owen on the show, and I've got to say I have learned some things. I feel like I always learn things. I've been a part of the LGBTQ, so I was really excited to hear what he had to say. One of the things that I totally understood where he was coming from was, the misconception surrounding it, transgender individuals, and like if certain far right people will say things like, well, they're only doing it because they're pedophiles so they can have access to same-sex bathrooms, or things like that. Sadly, it does seem to be a very widely spread misconception, which nobody I've ever met that is trans,
or even in the community, because they're saying the entire community is going to accept pedophiles because love is love. And I have never met a person who supports that. That is.
Oh no. No. In fact, I think the LGBTQ community would be the most against it than any other group, because love is love and pedophilia ain't love.
No, it's not. It's not. It's abuse. And what makes me so upset is that they're coming from a position where they believe they're pure, and yet they're saying this, and it's ridiculous. Like, anyway, yeah. Oh, it gets me so mad.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, for me, the thing that stuck out was if you don't think you're going to get support from your parents, you might want to wait, because a high amount of transgendered kids get thrown out of their homes and are homeless. I mean, they even have shelters now. Yeah, they have shelters now in a lot of the cities for these kids because they have nowhere to go. And, the other thing is, with them not getting accepted, there's a statistic where it says 50% of transgender boys have attempted suicide, and teen girls, it's 30%. So that's an alarming number, and it's due to lack of support. And so that has to change. There has to be more
Well, not just
acceptance.
lack of support, but understanding, just basic empathy.
Yeah.
I, you know, I don't have children, unfortunately, but if I did, and one of them, was to say, I think I couldn't imagine turning my back on my child for something like that. Because
And
for
some people
me,
do.
I know a lot of people do, which breaks my heart. For people, I just, I wish there was more that available and more help for them, because there are so many that don't get the support system.
Well, I mean, there is help available. It's just the thing is you got to want the help. I mean, there's counseling for parents so that they can, and support groups so that they can try to understand. But most of these people don't want to take advantage of it because they think it's a mental illness. They think it's shameful. They think,
against their religion.
it's against their religion or whatever. So these kids are told that they're flawed and they're wrong and they're bad and they're whatever.
I even heard somebody, a Christian preacher one time, call them abominations of the earth.
Yeah. So imagine you're 15 years old, you're struggling with your identity already. You've decided that you really do believe you're transgender, and this is what's being thrown at you. So you're worried about getting kicked out of your house. So 50% of transgender teen boys have tried to kill themselves, and this is why.
I mean,
so
I will say, when Owen mentioned that he didn't have to, he wasn't in school much, he was very fortunate in that regard. I know his generation is probably more accepting, but there's always at least one,
Society in general, Owen said he's a college student, so I imagine that's going to be difficult as well. A lot of society still doesn't accept it. It depends on where you live in the country too. More places like Texas is, Texas, what are you doing down there?
Yeah.
There are more places that are more accepting than others,
Right.
but we have a long way to go for these kids, and we can do better.
And this is the sad thing too. It's like we're fighting for LGBTQIA, depending on those of you who already know the I's at it. But we're also fighting for, Black Lives Matter as well. And I'm like, all these minority groups, which I consider a minority, we are. And so it's not why, just because you're a minority in whatever case, way, shape, or form, are you treated. Why is it derogatory? Why is it always, we're not going to take care of you because you're abnormal or you're not best, and what? I will never understand that.
Yeah, it's a civil rights issue. Everyone should have the same opportunities as anyone else. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
So what's going on with the question of the week, Elle?
Oh yeah, so nobody gave us the question of the week this week.
Bad. Shame on you people.
We are going to talk about what happened this past week with the Trump reversing the protection of insurance for transgender people.
What do you think about that as a possibility, Owen?
I think that's really stupid.
Does it scare you at all? I mean,
it kind of does, and not just of how it could affect me directly. It could, especially because I need health insurance. I need access to healthcare, but also with how we have COVID going on, denying healthcare to anybody at anywhere for any reason
during a pandemic.
Yes, that's a really, really bad idea, and that endangers the entire population. So I just don't know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question to you guys, because maybe you know this better than I do. But is this, does this mean that they can be denied healthcare altogether, or just be denied? Like, let's say you get health insurance and you've been on testosterone therapy or something like that. The next insurance company can see that and just deny you insurance completely?
I'm not certain personally. I do know that in general, it can be hard for trans people to access healthcare if a doctor knows that you're trans,
Yes,
they
that's
might
what I heard too.
they might reject you or just not treat you if you're trans for whatever reason. It's
Wow.
I think the insurance and the law basically only says that it won't cover transgender related care, but I'm not certain on that. Either
Okay.
way,
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Either way, they're going to put you all in jeopardy, and that's not okay.
Right.
It's not okay for anybody.
Right.
You know.
And I mean, where does it stop?
Right. We don't have another hour to talk about this.
Yeah, I know. This could be an episode all on its own.
Absolutely.
So, Owen, thank you so much for coming and talking to us and enlightening us a bit on this topic. And hopefully, you can come back again and
Please.
get a little deeper into these subjects. It was great having you here, and we thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
It was great being here. Thank you, and happy Pride.
Yes, you
Happy
too.
Pride, everybody. Yeah. Okay, so the topic for next week is Usher syndrome, which most of you have probably not heard of. So if you have any interest in learning something new and different, it's my personal story. So my personal experiences.
Which I find very interesting, and I'm sure many other people will too. So even if you don't know what it is, tune in because it's really, really interesting. And so the final thought that I thought would be appropriate for today, for this episode, is we are not what other people say we are. We are who we know ourselves to be.
I love it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So keep that in mind. Yeah. And with that,
we will say goodbye until next time.
And just remember, you are not alone.
Never alone.
Bye.
Bye.